It is my privilege that we can continue our study in the letter to the Galatians, and I start reading in chapter 3 from verse 18. For if the inheritance be of the law, it is no more of promise, but God gave it to Abraham by promise. Wherefore then serveth the law? It was added because of transgression, till the seed should come, to whom the promise was made, and it was ordained by an angel in the hand of a mediator. Now a mediator is not a mediator of one, but God is one. Is the law then against the promise of God? God forbid. For if there had been a law given which could have given life, verily righteousness should have been by the law. But the Scripture hath concluded all under sin, that a promise by faith of Jesus Christ might be given to them that believe. But before faith came, we were kept under the law, shut up unto the faith which should afterward be revealed. Wherefore the law was our schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ, that we might be justified by faith. But after that faith is come, we are no longer under the schoolmaster. For ye are all the children of God, by faith in Christ Jesus. For as many of you as have been baptized unto Christ have put on Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There is neither male nor female. For ye are all one in Christ Jesus. And if ye be Christ's, then ye are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. So, we want to see the road to faith. We want to see what does Paul explain here when he says, but the Scripture has concluded all under sin, that the promise by faith of Jesus Christ might be given to them that believe. But before faith came, we were kept under the law, shut up unto the faith which should afterwards be revealed. If we take the same author in Romans chapter 11, 32, we find the same idea, but a little bit more specific. It says here, for God hath concluded them all in unbelief. Because here it says that under sin. Now we know that sin is unbelief. We know that sin is mistrust in God. The impossibility to trust Him again through our sinful nature is our great problem. So God concluded all under unbelief, that He might have mercy upon all. So, let's make plain why circumcision and the keeping of the ceremonial law is contrary to the gospel. What is the faith that is revealed that was not there until the seed appeared? And I like the translation here of the King James Version where it says, by the faith of Jesus. You see, Jesus is the seed, and it is His faith that is that which is revealed, that was not revealed. That's why the law was given, for the hope that this faith might come and be revealed and bring the victory. Because through mistrust in God, sin came into the world, and all were concluded under sin, under unbelief. That through Christ, through His faith, that would be true no matter the circumstances. The reunification, the reunion with God would be made. Because here is the secret that we need to understand. But now the question is, of course, wherefore then serveth the law? And we have seen that the law has no power in itself. God created the universe, and He keeps this universe alive through His power. And His power is love. And through love, He keeps everything going. And everything goes according to this law. The law is just a pipeline. It's just a conduct without an electric wire. Without electricity has no power, because it's not in the law, the power. The power is in God. That's why there is no law that can make alive, and there is no law that can kill. It's only God's power that can make alive and that can kill. Because it's that power that is there. If you don't have it, or if you use the opposite, it's killing. But it's God who has the power. It's in relation to Him that we are responsible. So let's look to this fundamental law of the universe, that is the dependency of energy. All that functions needs energy. All energy comes from outside, and all energy is transformed and passed on. So that is as basic as it can be. And there are two conclusions that we find out of this. Every effect must have a cause. Every disease must have a cause. Everything must have a cause. And we know that the God is the cause, is the power for everything. So He is the cause and we are the effect. But now we are made also to do things so we can become a cause for our diseases or for the situations that are here on earth. And the law says everyone must take in order to give. That's the law of life. Everything takes to give. Nothing, since God is giving, nothing can be different than that. We must take, but we cannot keep it. If we keep it, we die. So everything needs to take it and pass it on. That's how the whole universe works. Now, in nature, God gave different laws, and there is the fundamental law and the secondary laws of nature. What's the difference? The fundamental law, as have we seen, is there, and on it every other law is built on. Gravitation is a law that is a secondary law. Why is it a secondary law? Because it works only under certain circumstances. If you take the circumstance away, the law is not there anymore, even though it exists. The liquids, if we don't have a state of liquid, the law for liquids doesn't work. The law for gases, the law for aerodynamics, the law for everything that God made works only if there is a certain circumstance there that the law should work. In this way, the secondary laws are laws that are always just working on circumstances. If the circumstance is not there, the law is without power. I mean, there is no power in that law. We have seen the law has no power itself. The power comes from God. But the difference to the fundamental law is that is independent of circumstances. In gravitation, in liquids, in gases, in aerodynamics, in everything, the fundamental law of the need of energy and everyone needs to take to pass on is included. It's in nowhere you can exclude it. That's why we have to understand nature. If we look to nature and say, well, nature is relative because I can take gravitation out, yes. But because it's dependent on circumstances. It's an absolute law given by God, but since circumstances are needed, a certain circumstance to be there, of course, then it functions. But if the circumstance is not there, it does not function. But we should confuse the fundamental law that functions always and is never, never, ever be put aside to that law that is dependent on circumstances. That's why we have to have this discernment in looking to nature. Now let's look to the 10 Commandments, the ceremonial law and circumcision. Here we have the 10 Commandments, and I said this is the law of all beings. It's the fundamental law. But there are 10 laws, and we will see how they are, in the end, just that fundamental law of all beings, written for the spirit of man. So, but God gave also secondary laws to his people. The secondary laws were needed in the moment when Adam and Eve sinned. The ceremonial law were given at the moment where there was a need for it, that they should show the problem that humanity now has. And so it was given in paradise. It was given immediately after the fall. God killed the animals and made them coats. But he made those dresses because of sin, because they lost their dress. Cain and Abel were the first to carry this ceremonial law out. We saw them. The one is carrying out in accordance to how God said it, and the other is carrying out not fulfilling it. God later, 430 years later on Sinai, he again gave this law. He added to it because it has to be also, as a Jewish nation, many things should be regulated. So he gave the laws of the tabernacle and the temple service, the daily sacrifices and the yearly feasts. All this were there for a need. They had to show that man was in a terrible condition. And then, of course, God gave Abraham circumcision because he failed in his faith. So he said, your heart needs to be circumcised. So all these ceremonial laws are secondary laws. They are dependent on circumstances to work. They are signs of bondage, and they are signs of hope for a Redeemer. But do they have any need to be there when faith has appeared? Because you see, the difference between the fundamental law and the secondary law is you can keep the secondary law, but you cannot keep the fundamental law under the circumstances of sin. You see, the outside regulation, you can circumcise. It won't cost you a little bit of hurt, but you can do it. It's inside of your power to do it. You can keep minutiously every command that God gave in the ceremonial law, because it's a practical thing. God gave practical advice, and people like practical. They like, do this and do that, but that's bondage. God wants us to do things by finding them out according to the way He has given us in our spirit, the capacities. Even the 10 Commandments, people can keep by outside. They can keep every one of it according to the letter. Because there also are in them some very practical advice. But if we don't understand how the fundamental law of all beings work, we will not be able to be saved. If we don't understand secondary laws, you can keep it. It's an outward thing. But this is an inward problem that we have. That's why when the inward problem is solved, when faith has reunited humanity with God, the secondary laws have no circumstance anymore for their existence. The fundamental law can never be changed because it keeps the whole universe going. But the 10 Commandments are written for fallen humanity, because we will see how they work just for fallen humanities. When we are going to be in heaven, we will keep the same law, but there will be no do not kill in it. So let's see how God made and adapted His fundamental law in 10 precepts and not only in 1 or 2. Because 1 is enough, as we will see how it works. So, this is the law for our spirit. We speak here just about our spirit. The heart is the subconscious. And there are only 2 actions in our subconscious that we need to do: take and give. And there is an order. God says you have to take in order to give. And whenever the Spirit gives, whenever He loves, He supplies the body with living or destroying energy. I could see this action of the Spirit in the body. I'm so glad for God's grace towards me to show me in the diseases of men their issues in their taking and giving. The disease of man is a revelation of man's heart, because the body functions of the heart. Its power comes when the Spirit gives. And if he would give the love of God, he would keep his body healthy like Jesus did. But now we are born with the law of death. We don't see that we give to receive. We even think it's correct to give to receive. We don't see that that's wrong. And so in the body, we must get the solution. We must know that we have needs in our spirit. And I explain the needs like with bottles, with empty bottles. You know, we say when we are hungry, I have a hole in my stomach. And according to this imagination, we can understand that our spirit has many bottles. The bottle for righteousness, the bottle for security, the bottle for... They're all holes for harmony, for peace. They're all bottles. But they're empty. Because the spirit, like the stomach, cannot have and make this filling for the bottles. He just can fill them, but he has no means to fill them. Like the man has no apple that his stomach can produce or that we can produce so that we can give it. No, we must take the apple and fill that hole in our stomach. And so the spirit needs to fill its hole that he has. That's why we live. And the only way to fill it is through love relationships. We can never fill the holes except through love relationships. And since there is only, by the law, only one practice to fulfill it, it's either a love relationship to take or a love relationship to give. There is no more love relationships except for either to take or to give. Now, the law says you need to take and to give. And in nature, we have only pure relationships, pure to take or pure to give. You can never give at the place you take, and you never can take at the place you give. So you either love a person to take, purely to take, or either you love a person purely to give. There is no mixture. Through the law of death, we think it's an exchange. But that we don't find in nature. The tree takes from the earth and from the sun. But he made the fruit not for the earth, neither for the sun. He makes the fruit for the animals. So he takes the carbon dioxide and transforms it to oxygen, but he does not take it from the same place where he gives it. He takes the carbon dioxide from us as humans and he gives it back to the air so that we can take it out of them. So everything takes to give. But where you take, you cannot give. And where you give, you cannot take. So let's make that clear. Love relationship must be pure relationships. And since the Spirit cannot be forced, the only way He can satisfy His needs, that He can fulfill those empty vessels in His Spirit, He must exercise faith. He must go outside to get that means. He must go to get that righteousness. He has never a righteousness of his own, because that's just a demand. He has to fulfill that vessel with righteousness, but he must take that righteousness from a source. Has never liberty in itself. He must go to fill that up. He must fill up the vessel of happiness. So all that he must do through faith. There's no action. There is nothing else can force the Spirit. So the only door to go outside that the Spirit has, or the only bell to open up the door, the handle to open up the door, the only thing that what it is faith, is trust. And now we exercise faith and trust, not knowingly that on that part where we exercise faith, we are dependent. On the part where we give, we are independent. We don't need to trust. The animal does not need to trust that someone eats his food. He has no need, because there is no trust, of course, in the tree, in something that is not spiritual, but he has no dependency. Who eats his food? That was the idea, that what I wanted to say. Now, we as humans, we need to know that we need to trust in order to take. But in order to give, there is no need to trust that person where I give. I only need to trust the person where I take, where I orient after it. And of course, it is spiritual things we orient after. It's not physical. Yeah? We need to have an orientation. And it is either for humans. Yes, we orient after humans. We think humans can fulfill our need. And we transport then from them their information, but then we are getting lost. So, let's give an example, because an example always helps us. Just recently I had a patient who was about 60 years old, and he had a virus infection of his left side of his nerve in his face, a zoster oticus on the left face. Comes, the herpes virus comes exactly around the end of the nerves, and he has it now for 3 weeks. He takes medication, and now it appears also a noise in his ear on the left side. Now, knowing that the body lives from what I give, the way I think, the one I orient after, I know that this man must be in prison. He is kept under the law. He is, I could say, under the curse of the law, because he cannot keep it. But he's not aware of it. So I ask him about his history, because I know, even though here the usage is of a virus, the virus can never be the cause for that disease. Because it's the nerve the virus go on. So I must understand, where does it come from? And I know such a reaction that we have in the body is not something that comes from an easy thing. We have a noise in the ear when we get some stress for a moment, and it passes on. But when it stays with us, then it remembers us that something is wrong in our hearts. And it's always wrong, because in the law of death, I take from the place I give. I don't understand the relationship. Why I should, and how should I do it differently? And so the man tells me his story. He's a very religious person, and when I said we have to find the cause, and the cause must be in a love relationship. And then he tells me the story that 4 weeks ago, he got the news that a good friend of him, a female friend, who is 10 years younger than him, is going to get married. He is friend with the lady for about 3 years, if I remember well. And since he is a very religious person, he has kept himself outsidely pure. He says, I've never had any intimacy with her, but he showed me a picture from her, and he was very, very, yes, glad. He said, look, this lady, how she looks. And he says, I love my wife. But now my wife is getting older, and my desire for sexuality, for intimacy is there, and I'm still strong, and a lady 10 years younger would be good to have. So I understand him as a man, but why would he have it? So he bound his heart to the lady by keeping outside his purity. But you see, when he hears that she now is going to be the woman of another man, he knows he has lost her. Because, you see, when I was in my terrible state of wanting and thinking a human being can make me happy, and I also was religious, I knew I cannot marry as long as my wife liveth. So I said, well, if she would die one day, then just have someone to take soon to be happy. And so he even confessed to me, he said, if my wife would die, in the next 15 minutes, I would call her and say, I marry you. So this is how the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. It takes the need of us. Yes, but we feel our needs from a human being. We are not even aware that all our relationships are the wrong opposite side. God has not given us a woman or a man that we should take from them. He has given us that we should give to them what we take from God. We are so deceived as religious people, and this man is a very religious person in his faith, and he would never go to commit adultery outside, but inside his desires and those good things that God put there, he wants to fulfill his happiness from a human. And now he gives to his body that what he cannot, he wants to control the human being, and he cannot. And he sees that the source of love slips away, that what he held in his bag for his future. And so he must get despaired in his heart. He must have a hurt in his heart that destroys him. Does he do it voluntarily? Not at all. He is deceived. But now, through disease and through the law, I can show him his deception, so that he can see that he put his trust, his faith in someone who you should never trust, that is, in a human being or in self. God says in that famous Bible chapter of Jeremiah 17, cursed is a man who trusted in man. Blessed is the man who trusts in God. For what purpose? For the purpose to take. Because we can have only relationship for to take, it must be pure, or to give. And so I discovered about 3 years ago, when I discovered the human heart and how it works, also the 10 Commandments. I discovered that the first table is an exclusive table. I discovered that the other one is an inclusive. That's why God made 2 tables of stones, so that He write the 2 precepts on it. And so here He comes and He says in the first that it should show where to take, and the second where to give. So when Paul says the law is not of faith, he's very plain. The law just tells you the source. The law tells the tree you have to have it from the ground, and you have certain particles in that ground that you can grow. That is determined by the law. The law is not of faith. But you can only exercise and fulfill the law as a spirit by exercising faith. Because the law never says that you have a chance to take from your woman, from your wife, from your child, your happiness. All that happiness that is taken out of human sources will fail. And it will destroy you in the end. It will take away your life completely. Everything you take from a human, every source of happiness will just last for a moment. Yes, you take it and you give it to your body and you feel well. But it's just for a moment. That's why God gave an exclusive commandment. He says, love the Lord only with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, with everything you are. Because you love Him to take from Him. You need Him. I exercise trust to take. You see, the taking of love. Some people get confused and said, well, that if I have to take love, by love, take love, then it's my love that I give to God. No. When the lung have the capacity to take and give, is that capacity the making the oxygen or changing it to carbon dioxide? No, it's just an exchange. So, can the stomach, by digestion, make the apple? Of course not. So, the spirit must like to fulfill his needs. He must fulfill them. They're empty vessels from a source that he likes. And God is the source that we must like. We must know that we depend on Him. But that this dependency must be out of trust. So we must like Him. Like I like bread to eat, so I like God. So, but I'm dependent on bread because the bread gives me the power to give. So, yes, it's my action that takes in the love of God. But it's the love that gives me the power to give. It's my action to eat, but it's not the power in the eating. And so God makes very plain, we need to take from someone. The Samaritan woman is, for me, again and again, a beautiful explanation of how Jesus deals with humanity who search for love at the wrong place. This lady is hungering for love. She lives in the law of death. She gives to receive. And she doesn't know that she actually takes from a human source to be satisfied for happiness. So she has love relationships. She has 5 men who are not her own men. And she's hungry. And Jesus knows her. He knows the heart. He knows that every problem comes from the heart. Friends, it's so fantastic when you see on the body where a human being feeds its spirit and tries to fulfill those holes in the spirit from a humanly source. And how desperate the spirit is that he cannot fill that cup. He cannot fill it with that where it really is, where he really is able to fulfill. That's why Jesus sits there on that well and says, "Woman, I have water for you that satisfies you. You don't thirst anymore." And the woman said, "Yes." "What's that water? That I might not come here again?" Well, Jesus uses the term water as the Bible uses the term water for God. She must have known, because God says through Jeremiah, says, "Me, the living well, they have departed from and made themselves holes that are empty, that cannot hold the water." So she should have known that Jesus is speaking of a spiritual matter. And Jesus just takes the physical to show the spiritual. And so, very beautiful. He says, "I have water for you." That means I have love for you. He says, "Oh, give it to me." And he says, "Yes, but only through relationship we can do it. So go and get your husband." So he makes that transition from the physical to the spiritual, so that the lady understands, oh, the need is not in my stomach for water. The need is in my heart for water. And so Jesus can show her need. And she sees that he's in bondage. She sees that she's under the schoolmaster. She sees that she's under the curse because she feeds from a source that is wrong. And so she runs away because the disciples come. But she became a believer. Jesus spent 2 days at her house. He spends 2 days in that place. And the people, when he left, without he doing any miracle, says, "We now believe that you are the faith that should be revealed," in the words of Galatians. We just know that you are the one where our souls can be satisfied to take. You are the one we can trust to live and be able then to give. Jesus says, "He who believes in me, from him will flow rivers of living water." Because that's the law. When we take from Christ, we will give. And what we give is the pure love of God, agape. But the problem is the exercise of faith in the relationship with God is needed. But faith is not, or the law is not of love. Is not of faith, sorry. So we must understand this relationship. We only can fulfill our needs to trust, but it must be the right source. That's why God says here, do not have other gods. Do not take from idols, and do not take God's name in vain. That means do not bear another name than my name. But take from me, remember the Sabbath day. Remember that I am your creator. Remember where you have to be dependent on. The only source that can satisfy is God. And he says, I am the water and I am the bread. What do you give the water when you take from him? What do you give the bread when you eat it? Nothing. Our relationship to God is a pure taking relationship. It's impossible to give God anything from us because everything we are comes from him. Everything. We don't go to him to give him something. We cannot, because it belongs to him. All our giving is what we took from him and give it to the purpose that he made us. But it is always his means that we transport. It's always His means that we take to give. So remember the Sabbath day. Remember, you have to take from God. The law says God is the exclusive source to trust in for water and bread. Why did Jesus go to pray? Why did Jesus have a relationship to His Father? It was for the purpose to take, that He might have for whom? For whom did He go to take? And this is a very important, major aspect. For whom do you pray when you go to God? Do you pray for you, that you might be saved? Do you pray for you that you might be wise? Do you pray for you? Or do you pray to give? You see, we are so selfish that our relationship to God is one that comes out of selfishness. That's why Ellen White says, God must take away the selfishness that leads us to Him. We must go to God, but we must take from Him. But if we take for us, we are still wrong. We are still under the schoolmaster. We are still under the curse and under the wrath of God. Because we have not understood. It's not for me that I take. It's for the purpose to give. How much does God do for Himself? How much did Jesus do for Himself? How much did He pray for Himself so in order that He should have it for Him? He said, I sanctify myself for the purpose to give. He says in Isaiah 54, the Lord waketh me up that I might have a tongue that can comfort the one that is bruised, the one that is in depression. So Jesus went to the Father. He was baptized every morning with the Holy Spirit. He took every day, but for the purpose to serve. If you take for you, if you read this Bible for you, then you are still under the curse. You have not understood the purpose of the relationship with God. Because the purpose of the relationship with God is to make us able to fulfill the purpose for what God made us. We go to take, but we don't go to take for us. We have the need of that bread that we take from God in order to give it to the neighbors, to the visitors that come to us. He who searches will find. For whom do I search? He who asks will receive. For whom do I ask? For whom do I knock? If I go to God and say, God, I need this so that I should be happy, He will say, I'm sorry. If you come to take it, to give it, then you understood love. You understood the concept of the whole universe that works like this. The Son takes to give. Everything takes to give. Never is anything except the human spirit that is in the law of death that gives to take, or that thinks that's the correct thing. Only we are opposite to the law, but we are not aware that we take. So even Christians, many have never understood the law. The Jewish people didn't understand the law because they didn't understand their human heart. And so they thought they fulfill the law if they keep the outside requirements. But Jesus found them that they were not fulfilling it. We do not live for ourselves. That's why the first commandment on the other, inclusive, says, honor a father and a mother. And here there are all neighbors included. It says, love thy neighbor as thyself. There is no condition for the neighbor because the neighbor you just have to give. You're there for him. He never for you. Because you have God as your source on a spiritual level. So, Honor thy father and thy mother is the hardest thing to fulfill, or it's the first law that we break, since we still take from mother and from father. As long as mother and father is the source of love, because it's a natural source in childhood, God made it so. But when mother and father should educate me to not take from them anymore, to be independent spiritually, orientation, no more after mother, after 12, 13, 14 years, my orientation becomes God. I just take from him because mother taught me this, like the mother of Moses taught Moses how it works. So at that time, it was known, but today we don't know it. Mothers don't educate their children for the purpose to be free of them, to make them to take from God and not be dependent on them anymore. No, they bind their heart to them, and so their children become their gods. And they're not even aware of it because it happened in their subconscious heart. They think it's love. Yes, it's love, but it's love to take. And that's only God's place. Only God is on the place to take. Mother and father needs to be exchanged there. So I got just a call from a lady whose father died suddenly, and she and her husband now are in deep depression. Why? Why is the life of the father for them so important? Is it that they mourn for poor father that he died? Or do they see themselves empty? Do they see themselves with no power anymore to live because their spirit is bound? It's under the curse. It's bound to a human source of life. It's an unconscious process. These are Christians. But it doesn't matter if you don't understand the sinfulness of sinful nature. That's why, wherefore then serveth the law? It was added because of transgression, that we see the transgression until the seed comes, and through the seed we might come out of transgression. We might come out of breaking it. Because the breaking is only at the taking place. And I have to go on here, but maybe we have another time to speak more about this law. But let's make very clear. If my mother and my father is still the source of taking love from him, I'm wrong. It is a nice feeling as long as he liveth, or they live. But when they're gone, you're gone too. Most mothers, most fathers are not ideal. And so children they're sitting on the throne, they have demands. All these demands have no reason. But we still do it. As long as your father and your mother owes you something because they did something wrong to you, you cannot honor them because you still take from them. So it's on both sides of dependency. We can even be dependent, very good from the parents because we love them. Oh, they're so good parents. And when they die, we're gone. And we even think before they die, what will I do when they die? And the parents abused us or did something wrong or never said thank you to us. And then the parents are on our list of debtors. And if they're on the list of our debtors, we are under the curse. And we will be unhealthy. I saw that most of our diseases come because this law, the honor of the father and mother, we cannot keep. We cannot keep it because we take from them. If we would take from God, the giving is included. If this law is just the second table is just as a table to see what comes out. So to have a reflection, because you might believe, you think you take from God. You might think, I'm a Christian. But if you see that you're in your relationships, you have no purity, you're just there for them to give. You don't need any human for love purpose to take from. If you understand that, then of course the second table is not necessary because it's included in the first. But God gave it to sinful fallen nature so that we understand it, that we must give to our parents love. We must honor them if they did wrong to us or if they're good and they die. We honor them by giving them the love of God without being dependent on them at all. Not to kill, no adultery, not steal, not lie, not covet. We all can keep these 10 commandments by the letter. Paul kept them. He said, I kept them. But when I saw in my heart, I had to die. Because the law killed me. He says, doesn't say the law kills him, but he says, because of the law, transgression was there, and I had to die. Because how can I get rid of the law of death if I am unable to fulfill the law? The rich young rulers come to Christ and he says, what shall I do to inherit the kingdom? And Jesus gives him this side of the commandments, this side, the giving side. Because that's the testing side for the first. Because if the first is kept, the testing side is just a matter of outcome. Because what you put in comes out. And so he says, well, I kept this law from childhood. And Jesus knows exactly he didn't keep it at all. So he says, okay, you miss one. Go and give. Go and give everything you have to the poor and come and follow me. Why did he leave? Because he had in his heart understood the law? Or was he under the law of death? Was he under the curse? He was under the curse because he thought that his riches are from him. He thought his riches he made himself. He had them and they were his. He did not understand that all his riches come from God and they were there given to him for the purpose to serve, not for himself. He could not give them because they were his own. And as long as we have ownership of our house, of our business, then we are wrong. We are lost. We are under the curse. We are under the schoolmaster. We are not free to fulfill the law. And he was not free. He had not understood the law. That's why the law is there, that we may understand the transgression. But if we don't understand the law, then we won't understand transgression. That's why this is my main means. The law of life is my main means to open up the eyes of my human patience. Last night I had a lady, she doesn't believe in God. She was always atheist. She's now in her 30s. And she has many issues because she takes from the wrong source. And she says to me, how shall I go to God, or how shall I do this? And I'm so happy for these people who have no religion at all, because they are for sure. When she left last night, my practice, I said, Lord, this candidate for heaven is sure. Even though she didn't take the decision yet. Why? Because conviction takes place that I need love. I need to fulfill it. But where I fulfill it now is wrong. It was more harder with the religious person to make him clear, because he kept the law. He didn't do adultery outside, but in his heart he was under the curse. So we must understand the law is given to us for the purpose of showing the transgression, showing that we do not love. We cannot exercise love. We cannot fulfill those empty vessels in us except from one, and that is God. That's the exclusiveness of God. She says, can I not go to another? No, it's just a person. God is a person. So, since everything is in the taking, since trust is just by the taking, God gives 10 commandments adapted to fallen human beings to warn them in 8th commandment to not take from the wrong source. That's why the first 3 commandments prohibiting to take from another place than God. And the 5 commandments from the 6th one, they say, here, do not take. You would only commit adultery because you take from a human source. You would only kill because you take from a human source. You would only steal because you take from a human source. You could only covet because a human thing is yours. You could only have and lie because you want to take from a human. God has adapted His law of life for the sinful human being, and He gives it 430 years later, even though the law was ever there, in this written form by His own finger, so that to make man clear, you have only one source. There is only one law in the exclusive 4 commandments that says take from God, and that's the 4th commandment. That's why this is the only commandment where all the decisions of man in the end will take place. This is the law to give. The parents, if you can love your parents, to just give them something. You came out of taking with them. That's why this is the first commandment to give. If we can love our parents to give them just, we are for sure just taking from God. This is just an evidence for what has taken here place. Every temptation that you and I face are just at the taking place. Jesus was always just tempted at the taking place. He either was tempted to take from the devil, he says, make out of these stones bread. And Jesus could have made it if the Father would have said it to him. But the Father didn't say it to him. It was the devil. So he said, oh, it's not a command from Father. I don't take from Father. I don't do anything except the Father's will. And then he says, jump down from the temple because the Father promised you to keep you. He says, yes, the Father keeps me when He says jump. But He didn't say to jump, so I don't jump. And then He says, look, here you have the world. Just take this world from me. And Jesus must have smiled here because He must say, devil, you can go away from me because you have nothing to offer to me. Everything I can take. All this world that you show me to me, all the kingdoms of this world are not yours. They're from my Father. I came to take them from Him. I only will bow down to take anything from my Father. So that's the one side of not taking from God. And the other is when God says take this, do not take it. Here is the greater temptation. When Jesus had the cup, the Father had it in His hand and says, my son, take the cup. There stood the devil in between Him and Jesus and said, don't take the cup. If you take it, you die. You are lost forever. But Jesus, and this is the faith of Jesus, that was revealed in Gethsemane and was fulfilled on the cross. On the cross, God took out every inclination or every possibility of any spirit to mistrust God. That is the achievement of Christ's faith. He who goes to Christ and dies towards his selfish nature will exercise the same faith like Christ. He will only take from God, and he will never listen to humans or to an information that doesn't come from God. He will take from God, and he will have all his human relationships just on the giving side. Then it doesn't matter if your father is good or bad, you just love him because you don't take. It doesn't matter if your wife is good or bad, you just are faithful because you're faithful to God, not to her. You do everything according to from whom you take. So we are prisoners under the law because we cannot keep them because of sinful nature that is revealed to us in the Bible in so many pictures. The sacrifice, the foreskin, the error, the blindness, the old man, the bondage, the leaven, the poverty, the flesh, and the evil eye. They are all our symbols, are pictures of the same impossibility of human beings to keep the law. Who needs to die to be free from the law? The law or me? Why is the law given? To show me that I am under an impossibility to keep it. So if I die, I am free from the law because now I can keep it. Now I can trust God. Faith makes me again to be connected to God. Then I am in harmony with the law. God is my orientation. Love is the expression of my life. How could it be different? The righteousness of God is my righteousness, so I have filled my cup with His righteousness. There is no conflict anymore between me and the Creator, the creature and the Creator. Eternal life is the result of being freed from the impossibility to keep the law. Everyone that cannot keep the law has no life in himself. But the law is not of faith. The Spirit must exercise faith to know. The law says you must take from God, and the law says you must live for God, not for you. You must live to serve. You are there to give. But you can have to give if you don't take. So I hope that's very clear. I want one day to be total free. Yes, Christ was always total free. And on the cross, He freed us completely. But us to be free, we need a process. We must learn how deceitful our heart is. And we must learn where it deceives us. And there might be a disease that helps us. Stresses in our life, conflicts, the death of a person might reveal to us where our heart is bound to. And then we will say, Lord, I need to die, that I might be off from the curse of the law. I need to die, that I be off from the schoolmaster. Because that's why Paul says here so very nicely, because he understands what he means by being free from the law. He says, for as many as you have been baptized into Christ, have put on Christ. So he who is baptized, is he still alive to his selfish nature? Of course not. So that's why let us understand it. He who is death, and since we die daily, because it's a process, we are not yet there. But we have experienced from the beginning, from the new birth, that there is power when we take from God. Then selfish nature, through the power of the cross, dies. And we can serve in the love and freedom of God. Amen.